Hello and welcome to our podcast, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about something really helpful: how to learn English in easy ways. Whether you are just starting or at an intermediate level, we've got some tips that can help you improve. I'm Emma.
And I'm Max. Learning a new language can be tricky sometimes, but with the right methods, it can be fun too. Today, we're going to share some simple but powerful techniques to make your English learning easier.
Yeah, Max, one of the first things that really helps people is to set a routine. It doesn't have to be a long or difficult routine, but doing something every day really helps. Like, you can start by listening to an English song every morning. Not only does it help with vocabulary, but it's also fun.
That's right, Emma. Music is such a great way to learn. You don't need to understand every word at first. Just listen, try to sing along, and after a while, you'll notice that you're learning new words without even trying. Plus, the rhythm helps with pronunciation.
Exactly. Another thing I think works really well is practicing with short and simple sentences. You don't need to use complicated grammar when you're starting out. For example, instead of saying, "I will definitely attend the meeting tomorrow," you can say, "I will go to the meeting tomorrow." It's still correct and easier to use.
Oh yes, keeping it simple is important. And don't worry if you make mistakes. Mistakes are a natural part of learning. When we were kids, we didn't learn our first language perfectly from day one, right? So don't be afraid to try and learn from any mistakes you make. Each mistake helps you get better.
That's so true, Max. Another tip I find really helpful is to watch English shows or movies with subtitles. I tell my students to watch shows in English with English subtitles. This way, they can read what's being said and learn how native speakers talk. You'll catch new words, phrases, and even get used to the speed of normal conversation.
I love that tip. And you know what? Even cartoons are a great way to start. Cartoons usually have simpler dialogue, so it's easier to understand. Plus, they're entertaining. Watching something you enjoy will keep you motivated to learn more.
Yes, and while you're watching, try to repeat some of the sentences or words. This is called shadowing. You repeat what you hear, just like you're shadowing the speaker. It's great practice for pronunciation and speaking.
Speaking of speaking, one of the best ways to improve is to speak as much as you can. Find a friend who's also learning English, or even better, a native speaker to practice with. But don't be shy, even talking to yourself out loud can be helpful. When you talk in English, you're training your brain to think in English too.
Yes, speaking to yourself is underrated. You can practice asking yourself questions like, "What will I do today?" Or "How was my day?" It may feel funny at first, but it helps with fluency. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get.
Another thing that I find really useful is reading. It doesn't matter what you read, just pick something you enjoy, whether it's a short story, news, or even comic books. When you read, you see how words are used in different contexts, and it helps build your vocabulary.
Definitely, reading is so important. And if you come across a new word, don't just memorize it. Try to use it in a sentence. Maybe write it down and say it out loud. The more you use new words, the easier they will become part of your everyday vocabulary.
Yes, that's a great point. Writing is also a good way to learn. Even if you write just a little bit each day, it helps you get better at expressing your thoughts in English. You could start a small journal, writing a few sentences about your day in English. It doesn't have to be perfect, just get your ideas down.
I love that idea. Writing about your day in English is such a good way to practice. And if you're not sure about grammar, you can use online tools to check your sentences. But don't stress too much about being perfect, just focus on practicing.
Yes, practice makes progress, not perfection. The more you use English, the more natural it will feel. And remember, learning a language is a journey, so enjoy the process. There are so many fun ways to practice.
Absolutely. You can also try learning English through games. There are language learning apps that have games where you can match words, learn vocabulary, and even practice grammar. It makes learning fun and less stressful.
That's a great suggestion, Emma, and another fun thing to do is try cooking using recipes in English. You get to learn new words, follow instructions, and enjoy a delicious meal at the end. It's learning with a reward.
Oh, I love that idea. It combines learning with something practical and enjoyable. So, we've talked about routines, listening to music, watching shows, reading, speaking, and writing. These are all great ways to improve your English step by step.
All right, so in the first part, we shared some really helpful tips for getting started with learning English, like setting a routine, listening to music, watching shows, reading, and practicing speaking. But, Emma, I think one thing people often overlook is the importance of focusing on the right vocabulary. Don't you think it's easy to get lost in trying to learn too many new words at once?
Absolutely, Max. That's such a common problem. I always tell my students not to stress about learning every word they see. Instead, focus on the words that you're going to use the most. Learning useful, everyday vocabulary is way more effective than memorizing a long list of rare words. For example, if you're learning English for work or school, it's helpful to learn words and phrases related to your job or studies.
Yes, it's like building a toolbox. If you fill it with tools you never use, it's not helpful. But if you focus on the tools you need, you can do a lot with just a few. Start with the basics. Words for daily activities like eat, sleep, work, go, come, and build from there. You don't need 1,000 words to communicate. With just a few hundred well-chosen words, you can express a lot.
Exactly. And speaking of basics, don't forget about phrases too. Sometimes learning a full phrase or expression is more useful than just single words. For example, instead of just learning the word help, it's helpful to learn phrases like "Can you help me?" or "I need help." It makes your conversation flow better.
That's so true, Emma. Phrases give you a way to use new words in real-life situations. And when you use them, it builds your confidence. You start feeling more comfortable with English. One thing that helped me when I was learning a new language was using what I learned in real conversations, even if it wasn't perfect.
Yes, using English in real situations is key. You could start small, maybe by ordering food at a restaurant or asking for directions. These are simple things, but they really build your speaking confidence. And the more you speak, the more natural it becomes.
Definitely, and another thing to keep in mind is to be patient with yourself. Learning a language takes time. Sometimes people get frustrated if they don't see results quickly. But language learning is like building a house. It takes time to lay the foundation, and you build it step by step.
That's such a great metaphor, Max. It's easy to get discouraged, but every little bit counts. I think it helps to set small, achievable goals. For example, instead of saying, "I want to be fluent," which can take years, start with smaller goals, like, "I want to learn 10 new words this week," or "I want to have a short conversation in English today."
That's right. Small goals are so important. They keep you motivated because you can see progress more easily. And when you reach one goal, you feel proud of yourself, which makes you want to keep going. Even something as simple as understanding a song lyric or a line in a movie can feel like a big win.
Exactly. Celebrating small victories is a big part of staying motivated. And on that note, Max, I think another thing learners can do is mix up their practice. For example, don't just study grammar every day. Try different things. One day you could read. The next day you could listen to a podcast. Then maybe spend some time chatting with a friend or writing. Variety keeps things interesting.
That's a great point, Emma. It's easy to get bored if you do the same thing over and over. Learning should be enjoyable, and when you mix it up, you're engaging different parts of your brain. For example, listening to English will improve your understanding, while speaking helps with fluency. Reading helps you pick up new words, and writing helps you organize your thoughts.
Yes, and also, when you use different methods, you start to see how they connect. For example, if you learn a new word while reading and then hear it in a podcast, you're more likely to remember it. It's like hearing the word in different situations helps it stick in your memory.
Exactly, and don't forget about pronunciation. A lot of learners focus on grammar and vocabulary, but pronunciation is just as important. Even if you know the right words, if people can't understand how you say them, it can be tough to communicate. So, practicing how words sound is really important.
Yes, pronunciation practice is key, and the good news is that there are so many ways to practice. You can listen to native speakers and try to copy how they say things. This could be from YouTube videos, podcasts, or even just talking to people in real life. And a great way to practice pronunciation is by recording yourself and then listening back. It can be surprising to hear how you sound, but it helps you improve.
That's a great tip, Emma. It might feel a little awkward at first, but listening to yourself helps you catch things you didn't notice before. Sometimes you think you're saying a word correctly, but when you listen back, you realize you can improve. And don't forget, English has some tricky sounds, especially if they don't exist in your native language.
Yes, and some sounds in English can be really different. For example, the TH sound in words like think or this can be hard for people to pronounce. But with practice, you can get better. It's okay if it's not perfect at first, just keep trying.
That's right. Another thing that helps with pronunciation and listening is paying attention to stress and intonation. In English, how you stress words in a sentence can change the meaning. For example, if you say, "I didn't say she stole it," you're focusing on say, but if you say, "I didn't say she stole it," you're focusing on she. It's something that comes naturally with time, but it's good to be aware of it.
Oh yes, stress and intonation can be tricky, but they really make your English sound more natural. A good way to practice is by listening to how native speakers talk and then trying to imitate the rhythm and stress patterns. Over time, you'll get a feel for how sentences should sound.
Definitely, and that brings me to another point. Don't worry too much about having an accent. Everyone has an accent when learning a new language, and that's okay. The important thing is that you're understood. Your accent is part of who you are, and as long as people can understand what you're saying, that's what matters most.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Max. People often get worried about their accent, but it's really not a big deal. Everyone speaks a little differently, and that's part of what makes language so interesting. The key is clarity. If people can understand you, that's what counts.
Yes, exactly. So, if you're listening and worried about your accent, don't be. Focus on being clear and confident. Your accent is just part of your unique way of speaking English.
Absolutely, and confidence is such a huge part of learning any language. The more you practice, the more confident you become. Even if you're not perfect, keep practicing and keep speaking. The more you do it, the more natural it will feel.
That's right, Emma, and remember, learning English is a process. It's okay to take your time and enjoy the journey. Keep practicing, stay curious, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. They're all part of the learning process.
So far, we've covered some fantastic ways to learn English using routines, focusing on everyday vocabulary, watching shows, reading, writing, practicing speaking, and even working on pronunciation. But I think one thing we haven't touched on much yet, Max, is how important it is to stay motivated. Learning a language is a long journey, and it's easy to feel discouraged sometimes. What do you think helps people stay motivated?
You're so right, Emma. Staying motivated can be one of the hardest parts. Learning English isn't something that happens overnight, and there will definitely be times when you feel like you're not making progress. One thing that really helps with motivation is to remind yourself why you're learning. Maybe it's to get a better job, travel, or connect with more people around the world. Keeping that goal in mind can help push you through the tough times.
Absolutely, keeping your purpose clear is a great motivator. Another thing that I think helps a lot is tracking your progress. Sometimes we don't realize how much we've improved because it happens slowly. But if you write down or even record your progress, like how many words you've learned or how much easier it is to have a conversation, it can really boost your confidence.
That's a great point, Emma. It's easy to forget where you started, but looking back at how far you've come can be really motivating. Even small achievements, like understanding a conversation or reading an article without using a dictionary, are huge steps forward. You could keep a language journal where you note what you've learned each week. It doesn't have to be long, just a few sentences about what you practiced or what new words you learned.
Yes, and it's not just about tracking vocabulary either. You could write about how you felt during a conversation or what part of learning English felt easier that week. For example, maybe you watched a movie in English and understood more than you did a month ago. These little reflections help you see your improvement.
Exactly, and I think another thing that really helps is setting realistic goals, like we mentioned earlier. Learning English can feel overwhelming if you think about the big picture all the time, like wanting to be fluent. Instead, break it down into smaller, more manageable goals. Maybe your goal is to learn 5 new words this week or practice speaking for 10 minutes a day. Small goals are easier to achieve, and each one you reach gives you a sense of accomplishment.
Yes, and reaching those small goals is what keeps you motivated in the long run. Another thing that can really help is making learning fun. We've talked about using music and TV shows, but you can also try using games, quizzes, or even language learning apps. There are so many tools out there that make learning feel like less of a chore.
That's a great point. Games and apps are amazing because they make learning feel interactive. And some apps even let you compete with friends or other learners, which adds a fun element. If you're someone who likes a bit of a challenge, you can set daily goals in the app, and it can be really rewarding to meet those goals.
Exactly, and learning becomes less stressful when you're enjoying it. Also, when you're having fun, you tend to spend more time with the language without even realizing it. The more time you spend with English, the faster you'll improve. You could even try making English part of your hobbies, like if you enjoy cooking, try reading recipes in English. Or if you like sports, follow sports news in English.
I love that idea, Emma. Connecting English to your hobbies is such a smart way to make the language part of your everyday life. For example, if you love traveling, you can start planning your trips using English travel blogs, or if you're into photography, watch tutorials in English. It makes learning feel less like a task and more like something enjoyable.
Yes, and another way to stay motivated is to join a community of learners. Being part of a group, whether online or in person, can make a big difference. You can share your struggles, celebrate your successes, and get advice from people who are on the same journey as you. Sometimes, just knowing that others are going through the same challenges can be really encouraging.
That's such a good point, Emma. Learning with others creates a sense of support and accountability. When you see others making progress, it motivates you to keep going too. And sometimes it's just nice to have someone to practice with. You can do language exchanges where you help someone with your native language and they help you with English. That way, you're both learning together.
Yes, language exchanges are a great way to practice speaking and learn from native speakers in a relaxed way. You're both learners, so there's no pressure. Plus, it's a chance to make friends from different cultures, which can make learning English even more interesting.
Exactly. Speaking of that, one thing that can also help is traveling or immersing yourself in an English-speaking environment. I know not everyone can travel, but if you have the chance, spending time in a place where people speak English can really boost your learning. When you're surrounded by the language, you pick it up faster, especially everyday conversation.
Oh yes, immersion is such a powerful way to learn. Even if you can't travel, you can create your own immersive experience at home. For example, try having an English-only day where you watch, read, and speak only in English. Or find online communities where people only communicate in English. Immersing yourself in the language, even in small ways, helps you think in English, not just translate from your native language.
That's a fantastic idea, Emma. The more you think in English, the more natural it will feel. And it's okay if you don't understand everything at first. That's part of the immersion process. The more you're exposed to English, the more you'll start picking up. Plus, you get used to hearing different accents and ways of speaking, which is really important for real-life conversations.
Yes, and while we're on the topic of exposure, another tip is to follow social media accounts in English. Whether it's Instagram, YouTube, or even Twitter, you can follow accounts that post content in English. It's a great way to get daily exposure to the language, and since social media posts are usually short, it's easier to understand and learn from them.
That's a really good tip, Emma. Social media is part of our daily lives, so why not make it a learning tool too? You can follow English-speaking influencers, watch short videos, or even read the comments in English. Plus, the content is usually more casual, so you get to learn the kind of language people use in everyday conversations.
Exactly, and don't forget, you can also interact with people on social media. Leave comments, ask questions, and join discussions. It's a fun and natural way to practice writing and even speaking if you're replying to videos or voice messages.
Yes, interacting online is a great way to practice English with real people. And if you're worried about making mistakes, don't be. Most people are really understanding and they know you're learning. In fact, some native speakers might even offer helpful feedback if you ask them to.
Definitely, Max, people are usually supportive, especially when they see you're trying to learn their language. And don't forget, making mistakes is actually a good thing. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn something new. The important thing is to keep trying.
That's such a positive mindset, Emma, and it's one that every language learner should have. So to wrap things up, we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about how to stay motivated, the importance of setting small goals, using a variety of methods, joining communities, and even immersing yourself in English. There are so many ways to make learning English fun and effective.
Yes, and remember, everyone's journey is different. Some people learn faster, others take more time, but that's okay. The key is to keep going, stay curious, and enjoy the process. Learning a new language opens so many doors, and even if it feels difficult at times, every step forward is progress.
Exactly, Emma. Whether you're learning for work, travel, or just for fun, every bit of effort you put in will pay off. So keep practicing, keep pushing yourself, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learning English can be a rewarding and even life-changing experience.
And with that, we're at the end of our podcast. We hope you found these tips useful, and remember, learning English is a journey. Take it one step at a time, and don't forget to enjoy it along the way.
Thank you all for joining us today. If you found this podcast helpful, make sure to subscribe to our channel and don't forget to share it with your family and friends who might also want to learn English.
Yes, please share it with others, and we'll see you next time. Keep practicing and stay motivated.
Goodbye, everyone, and happy learning.